voice for industry on the importance of global trade. Myron, Lockheed Martin has enjoyed our ongoing partnership with USIBC. We appreciate the partnership and the relationship and strengthening the U.S.-India bonds, and we look forward to you moderating this very important dialogue and hope to build on it as we deepen our activities across the Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Mark, I want to thank you for that very generous introduction of the distinguished guests who are going to be moderated by me today. I have to say that you really gave everyone a sense of their deep experience as diplomats, and I'm grateful not only for your introduction, but for your leadership and Lockheed Corporation's leadership in this very important U.S.-India strategic partnership. Lockheed has done incredible things to help strengthen and deepen the strategic and defense cooperation between the United States and India. So thank you for all you're doing with the company, and thank the company for all it's doing in this relationship. I'd be remiss if I didn't start by thanking Nisha Biswal and the entire India Council team, because this has been a really challenging period for India through the pandemic and for the global economy. And the work that Nisha and her team have done to support strengthening our economic and commercial ties, and as importantly, playing a huge contribution in coordinating relief during the pandemic, is a source of inspiration to all of us. And I thank Nisha personally and the entire team that has worked with the Chamber, the Business Roundtable, and other groups. So thank you, Nisha. Vijay, I would also be remiss if I didn't thank you for your leadership as chair of the U.S.-India Business Council, for your dynamic overview of the U.S.-India relationship, for your positive trajectory of where this relationship is heading, the context, of course, of where we are today in the pandemic, and of course, the context of recent high-level meetings between Prime Minister Modi and the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and of course, Vice President Harris. I think you laid out the connectivity between our two countries is getting stronger, but we have more work to do. We need to recover from this pandemic, and we need to recover with strength and commitment and resolve. And I think the work that the India Council is doing under your leadership and the board members and all the participants here today is vital. So I'm very excited to be part of this opening session to put context to the U.S.-India relationship. I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said about why we need to be bold and dynamic and why we need to be thinking about the future. We also need to be thinking about today. Where we are today is trying to recover from a global pandemic challenge that affects the United States, India, and the world, and how the United States and India further strengthen our strategic partnership is critical at this stage. And I can't think of two more distinguished people who are traveling miles to make this relationship grow and are looking at the geopolitical context of which we all think about the U.S.-India relationship today, which we may not have thought about 10 to 20 years ago. So I want to applaud, obviously, Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman. I want to applaud the Foreign Secretary Shringla for being here with us today in New Delhi. So all of you in New Delhi, you're seeing them live in New Delhi. For us in the United States, it's still morning here, but regardless, we're here together to work together on forging a stronger and deeper partnership that is already very strategic in context, but could grow. And we're going to talk about those areas where we can see growth. So from recovery to resurgence is the theme of the conference today, but I really want to get at it right away with these two dynamic leaders, these two very experienced officials, one who I've known for over a quarter century, and the other, of course, I knew when he was ambassador to Washington. So without much further ado, let me get started on how the United States and India are going to work more closely together on the critical global challenges, on our bilateral relationship, how we're going to build a more robust cooperation across the Indo-Pacific. I'm sure we're going to get into issues around the Quad meeting that just took place, and obviously in the overall global context. How do we want to see the United States and India relationship evolve, strengthen, and deepen in all facets of this relationship? So let me turn to both of them for opening thoughts and reflections before I get deeper into some specific areas. With that, let me first turn to Ambassador Sherman. I don't know if I'm supposed to call you Deputy Secretary Sherman or Ambassador Sherman, but either way, welcome to both of you to this forum. So, Ambassador Sherman.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you, Myron, with Nisha, with all the leadership of the Chamber and the U.S.-India Business Council. I think it's really important for all of us to recall that the United States and India have enjoyed nearly 75 years of partnership. And I've watched it over all those years, and I have to say, without a doubt, it has never been stronger. It has never been deeper. It has never had more meaning than it has today. All aspects of our relationship were on display during Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Washington. Bilateral trade, job creation, vaccine production, public health, defense and security. I could go on and on. The fact is, the partnership between the United States and India is indispensable for our two countries, for the Indo-Pacific region, and quite frankly, for the world. So many of the challenges that we face that have been outlined in the opening remarks of this conference can't be solved by any one nation alone. It will take the two largest democracies in the world, India and the United States, to meet those challenges, ending the COVID-19 pandemic, combating the climate crisis, deterring cybercrime and terrorism, all challenges that cross borders and that require bilateral and multilateral cooperation to solve. Above all else, I know from my terrific conversations with the Foreign Secretary today that we are both committed to ensuring a free, open, and interconnected Indo-Pacific region. That means upholding respect for the rule of law and the rules-based international order, including maritime space, promoting freedom of expression in the press, ensuring the free flow of commerce, investment, ideas, and information. I am so excited to be sharing this stage with my dear friend and partner, the Foreign Secretary. Mr. Secretary.
Namaste and good evening.
About your experience in Washington, but give your context here.
Right. So let me say good morning to our friends in the United States and begin by extending a very warm welcome to my very experienced colleague and good friend, Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman, to India. This is her first visit to India in her current capacity. She's been here, of course, a number of times on past official and private visits, and we're delighted that she has chosen to visit India, and we have started that visit with an extensive dialogue earlier this morning, which covered issues of interest to us on the bilateral, regional, and multilateral perspective. We would, of course, like to very much thank the US-India Business Council for hosting this event, for providing this opportunity for us to be in the same room. I'm very glad that Deputy Secretary Sherman has graciously agreed to visit South Block, and so that we could address the event together. I would like to, of course, thank a good friend Nisha and Myron, and of course our other colleagues Vijay Advani and Mark Hewitt for hosting this segment of the USIBC's India Idea Summit. Well, since its very inception, the USIBC has been proactively contributing to the India-US bilateral partnership, especially in advancing our economic and commercial ties. The two governments value our regular consultations with the USIBC, which provides ideas, suggestions, and map opportunities, all of which are essential to realizing the immense potential of the strategic partnership between our two countries. It's this close engagement at all levels of government and industry, as well as people-to-people linkages, that has made it possible to develop a synergy of perspectives on emerging regional and global issues. One advantage that we enjoy is the bipartisan support that the relationship enjoys in the US Congress, and the very broad support across the political spectrum in India. And that has enabled us to use our shared democratic values to build a substantive and robust economic engagement. There has been an organic growth and momentum in the relationship, given the stakes and investments in the India-US relations by a multitude of stakeholders on both sides. And today, I would agree with Deputy Secretary Sherman that this relationship is one of our most important. India considers its relations with the United States to be of paramount importance, and not only for our respective nations, but also in ensuring a free, open, inclusive, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, and a peaceful and prosperous world. This was also evident during Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to the United States for his first formal interaction with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and the first in-person Quad summit. The visit took place in the evolving regional situation in South Asia with the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, a continuing COVID-19 pandemic, and the widespread impact in the run-up to the G20 and COP26 summits later this year. The highlight of the Prime Minister's successful visit to the United States were his excellent meetings with President Biden and Vice President. And of course, I think this enabled a review of the India-US Comprehensive Global Strategic Partnership and the several contemporary regional and global issues which were on the table. This also, during these interactions, I think there was a keen desire on both sides to build on our shared democratic values, increase our collaboration on regional and global issues. Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman's visit gave us an opportunity to review the outcome of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States and look at how we could work on the road ahead of us. On the bilateral front, we are looking forward to some meetings that would take place in the next few weeks. The Defense Policy Group, the Economic and Financial Partnership Dialogue, the Trade Policy Forums, dialogues on terrorism, counterterrorism, and the 2+2 ministerial. All of these should take forward the vision of Prime Minister Modi and President Biden for the India-US relationship. Fast-paced developments in South Asia, especially in Afghanistan, will keep us closely engaged, and we've already discussed some of these issues earlier this morning. We have a keen desire to ensure that we both work together to maintain peace and security and stability in South Asia and beyond. I think during the Prime Minister's visit, he had some very good meetings also with CEOs of certain US companies that have an interest in investing in India. We have seen a great deal of interest in doing business with India, no doubt facilitated by recent economic liberalization measures and productivity-linked incentives that the government of India has announced. And of course, we will hope to see more on that economic track in the coming months and years. In the post-pandemic era, India and the United States look forward to cooperating to maintain, not only to recover from the COVID pandemic, but pandemic's, the associated downturn in the economy, but also to see how we can effect very, very healthy rates of growth, work together to enhance our trade and investment cooperation, also contribute to global economic recovery through supply chain resilience and diversity, tapping emerging technologies, working towards global health security, and facilitating clean and green technologies and climate finance for developing and vulnerable economies. These contemporary global issues were discussed during the Prime Minister's bilateral meetings, but also flowed into the Quad summit hosted by President Biden. At the recent summit, of course, there was a discussion on the COVID situation, on the possible vaccines that the Quad can supply to the Indo-Pacific. And here again, I think there were some very positive outcomes, and I'm sure we will go on to discuss all of this as we get down to the interactive session of our meeting. Let me just say that the relationship as it stands today is based on very strong shared values and principles. We have the same ideals. There is a strong people-to-people connect, which we cannot underestimate. the Indian community in the United States has been a bridge between our two countries, and I think there is every reason to believe that this relationship will only attain greater heights in the years to come. As I mentioned, successive administrations, the US and governments in India have contributed and built on that relationship over the last couple of decades. And today we are in a strong position, but poised to move forward exponentially on many of the areas that we have identified together as being important for us bilaterally, but also regionally and globally. Let me thank the USIBC for putting this event together, allowing us to connect to many of our friends in the United States and in India. The council has played, the chamber has played a major role in giving shape to the aspirations of industry in both India and the US. And as we adapt to the geopolitical dynamics and new opportunities and challenges that are here, the role of the USIBC will continue to be very important in providing inputs and ideas to both governments to take forward. I once again thank Deputy Secretary Sherman for graciously giving time in an extremely busy schedule in New Delhi. She's also traveling to Mumbai this evening to allow us to jointly address the session of the India Idea Summit 2020. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you both for being together and talking about the wide-ranging nature of this relationship, talking about the high-level dialogues, obviously the importance of cooperation on a number of areas. Let's jump right into one area that's top of mind for all of us. After 18 months of this pandemic, we still have variants out there that are causing surges around the world. We still have hesitancy, vaccine hesitancy. We still have questions of availability of vaccines. India has an important role in the supply chain. The United States has an important leadership role. Tell us from the conversations between the leaders, your own conversations, what does cooperation look like between the United States and India today in the context of multilateral cooperation when it comes to how we recover from this pandemic in the field of health and obviously economics? So what does it look like? What does our partnership look like? And how does it fit into the broader narrative? Deputy Secretary Sherman?
Well, thanks, Myron. And I was remiss not to thank Mr. Hewitt and Mr. Ambani for your incredible leadership role in the U.S. India Business Council, which has been a driver of tremendous progress between our countries and for the region and for the world. Our joint COVID-19 response builds on decades of public health cooperation, and our COVID-19 efforts have only reinforced an already strong partnership on health issues. We very much welcomed Prime Minister Modi's participation in the global COVID-19 summit and applaud India's decision to resume vaccine exports. Quite frankly, before India was hit with the horrible surge that it had to battle, it was really the country that the world depended on, and the world, India had come to everybody's rescue early on, and hopefully we all came to India's rescue to help them through. That's how we get through this very difficult time that we are all living through. As the largest global vaccine producer, the announcement to begin exports underscored that important role that India plays in leading the effort. Through the Quad Vaccine Partnership, announced at the Quad Leaders Summit, we will produce at least 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines by the end of 2022 at Biological E Limited, based here in India. Indeed, this is a partnership among and between governments and the private sector. We would not be able to move forward without that partnership. We also recently finalized an MOU on health and biomedical sciences to bolster cooperation on pandemic preparedness and biomedical research, an area of great importance to both of our countries and to business, as well as jobs move into the future. Yesterday, last evening, I was fortunate to participate in a roundtable here in New Delhi with young Indian medical researchers and public health professionals. They shared their insights from the fight against COVID-19 here in India, and we talked about how the United States and India can build back better to prevent the next pandemic, including by creating more resilient supply chains. I have to say, That was a room filled with young entrepreneurs who are building businesses that are based on technology, seated in the digital world, creating new products that I don't even understand, but are going to change the way the world operates and deals not only with pandemics, but other humanitarian crises. COVID-19 revealed a lot about our global economy, including how very vulnerable our global supply chains are to shocks. The United States and India are actively working together to build more secure supply chains for essential goods like medicine and medical supplies, semiconductors, and critical minerals. This is a major opportunity for both India and the United States and the private sector to create good jobs and strengthen our economies against future crises. And I expect resilient supply chains will be a topic of discussion of the 4th Annual Indo-Pacific Business Forum, which the US and India will co-host at the end of the month. Nothing that we will do in the future will be other than a partnership between governments, the private sector, and civil society. Both India and the United States have dynamic cultures of those business partnerships, those partnerships with civil society, and as the Foreign Secretary said, our people-to-people ties. Together, we can take on this challenge and move into the future.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. And as you know, we run the Global Pandemic Task Force in coordination with a lot of groups and a lot of business leaders. And we look forward to partnering with both governments in furthering the cause of recovery, the path of recovery. Foreign Secretary Shringlai, you mentioned this pandemic cooperation in your opening reflections. You want to add a little bit more flavor to this, and then before I turn to other topics.
Yes, Myron, one thought that struck me was that when our leaders met, the Prime Minister met President Biden, but also in the Quad meeting with Prime Minister Suga and Prime Minister Scott Morrison, the one subject that came up and understandably came up throughout that conversation was COVID-19 and how our countries could come together to cooperate to deal with the challenge that the pandemic has holds for all of us, and what we can do for the global common good, not just in the Indo-Pacific region, but beyond. And in that context, I think it's important that to note that there is a level of interconnectedness that this pandemic has brought home to all of us. We've all gone through phases, difficult phases in dealing with this pandemic. In the first wave of the pandemic, India reached out to supply over 150 countries with hydroxychloroquine and other essential medicines and equipment to countries all over the world. We also were in a position to supply 66 million doses of Indian manufactured vaccines. As Deputy Secretary Sherman mentioned, we were very badly hit by a second wave, the Delta variant that came upon us in a very sudden and very severe manner. And the number of caseloads went up over 4 times as that compared to the first wave. Dealing with this crisis, we received much needed solidarity from the United States and other partners and friends from all over the world. I did tell Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman, I particularly thanked her for the assistance that the US government, US industry, the private sector, including the USIBC, as well as individual organizations extended to us at this point of time. And you can't imagine the amount of confidence it gave the people of India to get that level of support when we needed it the most. We also recovered very quickly from as quickly as the wave hit us. We also recovered quickly. The number of cases went down rapidly. And we were in a position where we had scaled up manufacturing capacity of liquid medical oxygen, remdesivir, all sorts of equipment and medicines that were needed to combat COVID-19. And no sooner than we had recovered somewhat, we were asked by our friends in the region, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, our neighboring countries for support. We extended the support in the form of liquid medical oxygen. Several shiploads of oxygen were sent to all of these countries by our Navy. We also provided oxygen to our neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. We also had extra stocks of remdesivir, which we could immediately make available. The point I'm trying to make is, again, that when you can help others, you help others. When you need the help, others come down to help you. So it really, I would say, essentially underscores what we've been saying all along. There is a traditional saying in India, which is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family. And so in that family, you help each other. There is a level of mutual support and solidarity. And this is what we've seen very, very strongly during this COVID crisis. We've also seen the need for resilient, stable, and secure supply chains. We've seen the need to work together to address many of the issues that have come up as a result of the pandemic. I'm happy to say today that while the pandemic continues unabated with new variants across the world, we are learning to cope with the prolonged pandemic and its wide-ranging impact. In India, we have seen a remarkable recovery. The active recovery rate for the active cases now stands at close to 98%, and the positivity rate is less than 2%. What is important is that we have been able to extend our vaccination program to all parts of the country. We today have administered over 900 million vaccines to our citizens. About 70% of our citizens have received at least the first dose, and this is, I think, a very remarkable achievement if you consider the sort of magnitude of numbers involved. We are doing about 10 million vaccinations a day, and we do believe that it is this policy of ensuring not just that you have the infrastructure support in place, but also that your population is immunized to the largest extent possible, that will enable us to look at COVID-19 and as something that you can challenge, that you can deal with, and that you can continue to have normal activity and normal economic life even while the pandemic continues, without harming you in a manner that is detrimental to your interests. Deputy Secretary Sherman mentioned about the fact that we had announced our intention to resume exports of our vaccines. That is entirely correct. I think the Prime Minister, when he was in the United States, informed President Biden that we would resume exports, but also that we would make available immediately for the use of the Quad several million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine manufactured in India by Biological E. And this could be used for our friends in the Indo-Pacific region. We have had extensive collaboration and cooperation with the US private sector not only in joint research and development, but also in the manufacturing process. As you're aware, remdesivir is licensed by Gilead Sciences to at least 5 or 6 companies in India, and we supply not only a market but also several countries in the region. We are working
Foreign Secretary, I just want to make sure we get to a couple other issue areas. So maybe just finish up
absolutely.
Quick thoughts here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead, Myron? I basically said what I had to incorporate.
Okay. Well, look, I understand why both of you are very comprehensive on this issue, because it's such of paramount importance to our relationship and to the global recovery. But there are other global challenges, and we don't have a lot of time. So I'd like to ask each of you just to give us your sort of top line messages on 2 existing opportunities and challenges. First, climate. There has been high level dialogues between the Indian government and the US government. I know, of course, our special presidential envoy, John Kerry, has been in discussions with his counterparts in India. And I know that our US Secretary of Energy as well. So climate is top of mind in terms of how we adapt, how we take global action. We have the COP26 conference coming up. I'd like each of you just to quickly reflect on what you think we can do together, what needs to happen at COP26, what kind of effort and sustainable effort can we put forward to make sure that we're injecting innovation, investing in renewable energy and sustainability into our economic development agenda, bilaterally and multilaterally. So first, I'm going to turn to you, Foreign Secretary Shringla, for your reflections, and then I'll turn to Deputy Secretary Sherman.
Thank you, Myron. I think the issue of climate change is important to both our countries. We both agree that we need to not only work on making sure that there is the measures, actionable measures that are needed in our respective countries to deal with this issue, but also to see how we can promote action with regard to climate change in different parts of the world. And in that regard, I think our conversations, both at the level of the leadership, but also with regard to special presidential envoy John Kerry, when he visited India on the last 2 occasions, have been very, very productive. From our perspective, we are committed to dealing with the issue of climate change, not only because it is important globally, but we do believe that it's important, for our own country and for the future of our generations to move quickly on this issue. And dealing with a large population like ours, where steps that can be taken to address climate change would also contribute to the overall global, I would say, progress on climate change is we do realize an important contribution by itself. India is one of the few countries that has moved quickly to fulfill its contributions, its commitments under the Paris Accord. We are also have with us our own intention to create 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by the year 2030, which, as you can imagine, is an extremely challenging task, but one that we are resolute in fulfilling in terms of our commitment. We have been discussing with the United States how we can work together in achieving this vision in terms of meeting the commitments that we have. We already have developed what is called an Agenda 2030 for Climate and Clean Energy Partnership. Emerging fuels have been identified as a new area of cooperation. This dialogue will be led by 2 ministers with focus on hydrogen, biofuels, and waste to energy. So essentially, what I'm saying is that there is a plan of action that the 2 countries have chalked out. We are working closely together, not just in looking at technologies and new initiatives that we can take, both the level of the Quad and bilaterally, but also at seeing how we can mobilize the appropriate financing, what is called green financing, and green technologies needed to help us attain our very ambitious target and to meet our own commitment with regard to climate mitigation, climate action. So that's very in brief, because there is a lot more that I can talk about, but I do understand that there are, as you put it, more pressing issues that are left on the agenda.
Deputy Secretary, your reflections?
Sure. We are really impressed with India's ambitious goal of having 450 gigawatts of renewables installed by 2030. The United States has set a climate goal of having our carbon pollution by 2030, building a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035, and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. The Quad countries are working together for a successful outcome of the G20, which is a very important meeting coming up, and COP26 that will uphold the level of climate ambition and innovation that this crisis requires. As you noted, Myron, the special presidential envoy on climate, John Kerry, has been to India twice. I've told the Indians, don't be surprised if he shows up again. But combating the climate crisis is an all hands on deck in the Biden-Harris administration. Our Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, co-hosted the revamped Strategic Clean Energy Partnership with India in September. And former Secretary Kerry launched a new climate action and finance mobilization dialogue last month to help accelerate India's clean energy transition. And as the Foreign Secretary said, Agenda 2030 partnership, which President Biden and Prime Minister Modi launched in April, will help mobilize finance and technology to help India and to break ground for other countries and how to move forward. I think the private sector is a more critical partner in this arena than almost everywhere else. I've always been impressed with what the Chamber has done in putting climate at the top of the agenda, and what the US-India Business Council has been doing to try to achieve and bring business on board for the technologies that will be necessary, and the commitments by business that need to be made to get us to where we need to be to stop the droughts, the fires, the pandemics, and all of the other issues that we have to face around the world, the increase in asthma, air pollution, all of the things that make it hard for people to do the business of their day-to-day lives.
Well, we're running out of time, but I do want to ask you, Deputy Secretary Sherman, the heart of the Indo-Pacific partnership is the relationship between the United States and India. But there is another country that looms in the Asia-Pacific arena that is very much at the center also of our thinking, and that is China. At the same time, you recently had the Quad meetings with Japan and Australia and India. Tell us what India-U.S. cooperation looks like in the context of also managing and dealing with challenges associated with the U.S.-China relationship. Real quickly. Big topic, but real quickly, your reflections.
So I'll try to be brief in given the time. There's a lot we could both say about this, I'm sure. But shared democratic values are the bedrock of the U.S.-India relationship. We're the oldest and largest democracies in the world. India is going to be the largest by 2030. And we've reaffirmed our strategic partnership over several past administrations. And as the Foreign Secretary said, both parties in the United States and across the parties here in India. And we've built a strong network of Indo-Pacific alliances and partnerships as well. And they are all based on the international rules-based order. Our partnership is essential to upholding that. We have a shared interest. We're major defense partners, concluded 4 major defense enabling agreements in recent years. Regarding the PRC, we've been clear. We're ready to compete and compete vigorously, but we want a level playing field. And you heard U.S. Trade Representative Tai talk about this earlier or this week or last week. I can't even remember what day it is.
This week.
So thank you. We'll compete vigorously with China where we should. We'll cooperate with China where it's in our interest to do so. I'm sure the same is true for India. And we will challenge China where we must, where it undermines our interests, the interests of our partners and allies, or threatens the rules-based international order. I think we in India are like-minded in that regard. We don't ask countries to choose between the United States and the PRC, but we do ask for a level playing field. We do ask that countries understand that economic coercion is not the way forward to build a strong international economy and a global prosperity and peace and security. So we have had very extensive discussions here today with the Foreign Secretary. I met with National Security Advisor Doval, and I'll be meeting with the External Affairs Minister Jay Shankar following this meeting. I've had excellent meetings here, and I think we all are ready to do the work that's necessary to ensure prosperity, peace, and stability in the world.
Well, we're going to have to end it there. Let me just say to both of you, you have been great contributors to diplomacy, both in the context of the U.S.-India relationship, but in your own right in so many other ways. And we're grateful that you have both participated here today. Important conversations are going on in New Delhi. We thank you both for your contributions. Know that the U.S.-India Business Council at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is committed to strengthening and deepening the ties between our two countries. We'll do everything we can, whether it's around the pandemic issues, whether it's around, of course, climate, and of course, trade and investment. But we can't do it alone. We're looking to the partnership with the two governments, and we are grateful for the trajectory of this relationship and count on us to be continuing on both sides, in India and the United States, do more in regards to, I think, doubling down on the trade investment piece, which is, I think, a cornerstone, could be a foundation cornerstone to how we get to over-challenge these issues that we talked about today. So thank you both, and we look forward to seeing you further in our conversations.
Thank you, Myron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gautam.